Bienvenidos, aloha. Welcome into Sunset Rewind. Alex Crawford, Howard Kroom with you here, and we have a very important special announcement. It is time for the Sunset Rewind People's Choice MVP. Howard, we went through and we picked 2 nominees from each school, and then we're going to let the people go on to sunsetrewind.com and vote and pick theirs. Before we let you know who those nominees are and explain our picks, I just want to say how hard it was to narrow it down to 2 from each school, especially for some of these teams. It was really grueling. I mean, we were debating right before we hit record on these cameras about who we're going to pick.
Absolutely. I mean, I think about a school, we were just going back and forth about Huntington Beach. So many guys on that defense that made major contributions, but not just Huntington Beach. All these teams have guys that go both ways, are dominant on offense and defense, so we always praise the talent that the Sunset League has, and because of all that talent, it was almost impossible for us to narrow down 2 guys for each team.
So no disrespect to anybody who got left off, and obviously just to be nominated in the top 2 for each team, I think is quite an honor.
Absolutely.
We're excited to get into that. You can stay updated on all of this on our social media channels at Sunset_Rewind. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Sunset Rewind, and then vote. Stay updated on sunsetrewind.com. You're going to want to go to sunsetrewind.com, cast your vote for your choice for league MVP. And important to note, you can only vote once. I know we've got our guys. I know when we left Troy Fletcher off our top player performances one week, Charger Nation was at my door with pitchforks and torches.
As they should have been.
Respect. No, and I respect that. I was wrong on that, but you can only vote once. You can't. I know there's some guys that you might want to stuff the ballot box for, Howard, but you can't do that.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to get my 1 vote in, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah, we've got systems in place to make sure you can only vote once. You have to register, et cetera, et cetera. Let's jump right into it. Let's start off with the Los Alamitos Griffins, your Sunset League champions. And our first nominee for them is, of course, quarterback Malachi Nelson. Eye-popping stats on the season. 2,500 passing yards, 35 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, set the all-time Griffins career touchdown pass record. He's just a couple away from the single season record. Might get that in the next week. So Malachi, our first nominee for People's Choice MVP.
Well, like you said, eye-popping stats. I mean, over 30 touchdowns, and I have to mention, a lot of times he's only playing a little bit of the third quarter, not playing any of the fourth quarter. So those numbers, they could be much higher if Malachi was playing the whole game. We know Los Al is a team that, yeah, they're in the tough playoff division, but they're as good as most teams in the state, top 8 in Southern Section, and they're led by everything they do starts with Malachi Nelson. He's a great passer, has a huge arm, runs when necessary. But what I love about Malachi is he's an amazing kid and he's a great leader. He's the kind of guy you need on your team if you want to be successful.
I think one thing to note about this too is, yeah, the numbers are eye-popping for Malachi, but our criteria for this whole list is really what the player meant to their team. If you took that player off the team, what would happen? And it's impossible to say, but I mean, Malachi is the heart and soul of Los Alamitos Griffins.
Absolutely.
Also nominated from Los Al is wide receiver, cornerback, and kick return specialist, Makai Lemon.
Well, Makai, I mean, we just talked about what Malachi means to his team, but Makai is his partner. You know, that's the 1-2 punch, the 7-1-4 connection. These guys have been friends since they were kids. They're going to Oklahoma together, and Makai is the guy that gets a lot of those touchdowns for Malachi. And we know there's DeAndre Moore, Ethan O'Connor, Alec Wills, these other amazing receivers, but from an offensive perspective, I mean, Makai's a guy that's almost impossible to stop. Then you talk about what he does as a punt returner. You talk about what he does as a cornerback. He's a all-world defensive specialist as well. You can put him on the best receiver on the other team, and he'll shut the guy down. So he absolutely deserves to be on this list. But it's hard to separate Makai from Malachi, but you know, Makai means a ton in multiple different facets of the Los Al Griffins team.
12 receiving touchdowns, 1 kick return touchdown, 4 interceptions on the season for Oklahoma-bound junior Makai Lemon. Jumping down to the Edison Chargers, the team that finished second in the Sunset League. Our first nominee is senior wide receiver Nico Brown from the COVID season, the reigning Sunset League Offensive Player of the Year, and he is a playmaker, a difference maker, electric, whatever adjective you want to use. Nico Brown is fun to watch.
Absolutely. I mean, when you turn on the film, you're watching the Edison Chargers, he's going to jump off the screen at you. He's so dynamic, so shifty, does everything. He blocks when it's a screen for somebody else. He runs after the catch. That's some of the most impressive stuff that he does. You know, you can't bring him down. He's fast, he's sturdy, just a really, really amazing weapon. Like you said, reigning Offensive Player of the Year for a reason. Man, Nico Brown, he's He's what an MVP is made of.
He's starting to pick up some more scholarship offers as well, and he's a guy I'm so excited to see what he can do at the next level, what his ceiling is. He puts in work out there. I think he's got 9 touchdowns on the season, over 700 receiving yards, and just a guy that you have to know where he is on the field at all times.
Well, we were just talking about off air, over 16 yards a catch. So he's making the defense pay when he gets the ball in his hands. And keep in mind, there's 2 other receivers on his team with over 30 catches this season. There's 4 other guys that get the ball if you include the running back, you include, all the receiving core. So Edison, they spread the ball around on their offense, but still we get Nico Brown with the production that he does because he's just that talented.
Our other nominee from the Edison Chargers, senior running back / cornerback, a guy who is a touchdown machine, Troy Fletcher. 19 trips to the end zone on the season on the ground for Troy Fletcher, just a shade under 1,000 yards. He also gets it done on the defensive side of the ball, and he has been just such a bright spot. Such an amazing breakout player this year for the Edison Chargers.
Yeah, we didn't know that we were going to get all of this from Troy Fletcher. I mean, he's just been absolutely incredible. In addition to how good he's been on the field, we know Coach Grady says he's an even better guy. He's an even better leader, even better human being than he is a football player. And that's tough to do. You just read off some of his stats. As a running back, 7.8 yards per carry. But then he also brings the defensive side as well. 34 total tackles, 12 pass breakups, 2 fumble recoveries, a blocked punt. I mean, he's a guy that's literally getting stats in every phase of the game, making an impact every single time he touches the field. You have to account for where's Troy Fletcher at. No matter if it's offense, defense, special teams, he's a guy that's going to make you pay, and a guy that Coach Grady is so happy to have on his team.
Troy Fletcher is a football player.
Absolutely.
Straight up, 19 touchdowns. I just want to say that one more time. In the regular season, 19 touchdowns, almost 2 touchdowns a game throughout the season against some tough competition. So some great choices for MVP from the Edison Chargers. Moving on to the Corona Del Mar Sea Kings, our first nominee for Sunset Rewind People's Choice MVP is junior quarterback David Rasor. He put up big numbers on the season, but what stood out to me about David Rasor in the rivalry game, huge rivalry game, high stakes, Battle of the Bay, winner books a trip to the playoffs, although both teams ended up making it to the postseason. David Rasor threw 4 first-half interceptions, and Howard, we were broadcasting that game, and at no point did our faith in the ability of David Rasor to lead the comeback waver. We were like, there's no one else in the Sunset League that I'd want quarterbacking my team right now, even after throwing 4 picks.
Well, I mean, look at the adjustments that his team made. It was a very, very tight game in the first half. David didn't have the game that he wanted, but there was a lot going on. He got hit on a couple of those. It's not like he was just throwing bad balls. Sometimes he was getting hit, his balls were getting tipped, but they came back in the second half of that game, and the offense looks like they hadn't missed a beat. They made excellent adjustments. David Rasor was comfortable, knew exactly what he wanted to do, knew what his coach was asking him to do in the second half, and the Sea Kings ended up running away with that game. So even looking at that one, that was a bad game, it ended up being a good game as well because David Rasor ended with 4 passing touchdowns.
29 touchdowns through the air, 8 interceptions, and 5 rushing TDs. A sneaky good runner, David Rasor, and the Sea Kings have been going to him more and more throughout the season.
Well, only threw 8 interceptions, and like we just said, 4 of them came in one game. So you take those out, the man has 30 touchdowns and 4 picks. I mean, he's just an excellent football player, a great leader, and he's only a junior, so getting better and better. I wish he was quarterbacking my team if I'm a football coach because he brings exactly what you want.
Our other nominee from Corona Del Mar is senior, I guess I'd say linebacker, but he has a little bit of everything. Plays H-back, tight end, wide receiver, linebacker. Charlie Mannon, one of the team captains for Corona Del Mar, and he's a leader. He's got receiving touchdown. He's got a lot of tackles. He's carried the ball a few times, played running back a little bit this season, so he does it all. And Coach Dan O'Shea says he's a superhero human as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you read off all his positions, you ended up getting to the fact that he's carried the ball, but I was about to say, yeah, tight end, H-back, receiver, linebacker, D-lineman, all those things. And in addition to that, I think he has the 3rd most carries on the team as well. So he does literally everything for Corona Del Mar. Coach O'Shea loves him as a human being. He's a big-time leader for the Sea Kings. He's a vocal leader. He leads by example. But he's also making a huge impact. Had a big touchdown that put the Sea Kings in an excellent position in the rivalry game against Newport Harbor. 2 blocked punts on the season, 2nd on the team in tackles for loss, and a lot of those TFLs came on 3rd down. Big sacks when Corona Del Mar needed to get off the field. Bam, here comes Charlie Mannon making a big play when his team needs him. So he's a guy that absolutely deserves to be on this list.
Now let's talk about the Newport Harbor Sailors. Our first nominee from Tar football is junior safety Carson de Avila. Stupid number of tackles on the season. I just got to double check the number. Yeah, 94 tackles. That actually puts him top 3 in the state of California for tackles on the season. But Howard, we watch a lot of Sailors football. We broadcast their games, and we know that he is the defensive quarterback, the leader, always in the right place, making plays for the Sailors.
Absolutely. One of my favorite players to watch in the league. Might be leading the league in tackles. He's a guy that when you turn on Newport Harbor's film, he jumps out right away as well. Just another guy that you see, he's a little bit different. Super athletic, the hardest hitter on the field every time.
Oh, every time. I mean, that doesn't show up in the stat column, but a lot of those tackles are nearly beheadings.
And we know just from watching the game, another thing that doesn't show up in the stat column, a lot of times de Avila will find himself one-on-one with the running back in the flat, one-on-one with the receiver in space, and he's going to make that tackle. He's a guy that every time I know when Harbor needs a play, when they need a big tackle, when they need something to happen, Carson de Avila is going to make it happen. He does everything right. He's a leader. Just an excellent defensive football player and plays a little bit of quarterback, just very versatile. Plays special teams, makes big tackles on kickoff. A very, very well-rounded football player.
Yeah, Sailors sub him in for some quarterback packages, and he actually has over 100 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground this season. We call him the straw that stirs the drink defensively for Newport, but I can't wait to see what he does next year in his senior year for the Sailors. Our other nominee for Newport Harbor is another junior, running back Payton Irving, who has 11 touchdowns on the season, strong downhill runner, and the Sailors' offense struggled a lot this season. Payton Irving was often a bright spot for them.
A huge bright spot. We didn't know what we were going to get from Payton Irving. We had no idea. We knew he was a hard runner. We saw some decent stuff in his junior year, but what we were shocked by was the vision, the patience in the hole, because we love how he runs downhill and how he punishes guys, but he'll also wait, set up the block, and then bam, burst of speed, great acceleration. Had, I think, 70 yards receiving and a touchdown a few weeks ago, in addition to over 100 yards on the ground. So he gets everything going for the Sailors. When Payton Irving gets room to run and can make the defense feel it, you know the Sailors offense is going to have a good night.
Heading over to Main Street in Huntington Beach, our first nominee from the Oilers is senior quarterback A.J. Perez. Now, Huntington Beach season didn't go exactly the way they wanted, a little bit disappointing by their standards, but A.J. Perez was the crux of everything they did offensively.
Oh, he certainly was. I mean, he's a really good quarterback. Didn't always get the protection that he needed, was often under pressure, but we saw games where A.J. Perez had 300 yards passing, 4 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown or 2. He's another guy that really makes you pay in different facets of the game, whether it's throwing the ball over the top, scrambling, making something happen and finding a receiver late, or just running the ball himself for a 50-yard touchdown. So he's a guy that you love to have at the quarterback position for you because he can make every throw. He's a leader. He's a poised kid. Like you said, Huntington Beach didn't have the year that they wanted, but when they did have success, when stuff was going right, it's because AJ had stuff going and had time to operate the way he needed to.
2,000 passing yards, 23 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, and 4 rushing TDs, and even a receiving TD for A.J. Perez on the season. Our other nominee from Huntington Beach High School was another guy who does a lot of things on the field, Tyler Moses, linebacker, receiver, punter. I think he toted the rock a few times out of the backfield, and so Moses is going to be our other nominee for MVP from HB.
Well, it was tough. This was a tough one for us. You know, we love a lot of the guys on Huntington Beach's team, particularly on the defense. You know, Jeremy Carpenter had a huge year. Eli Anderson had a crazy year. Nate Tawanuu, love him on defense as well. So there was guys on Huntington Beach that made it tough, but ultimately, looking at Tyler Moses, you know, he's a guy that played receiver and was a go-to receiver. Even though he didn't have a ton of catches, he had a lot of touchdowns, got 6 receiving touchdowns, averaged over 21 yards a catch. So maybe he should have got the ball a little bit more, but a lot of times defenses were keying on him. He was second on the team in tackles for loss. He blocked a punt, recovered fumbles. He's a guy that did a little bit of everything for the Oilers and a big-time leader, big-time emotional leader for the Oilers. And a lot of what they do defensively started with Tyler Moses.
And last but certainly not least, the team that finished at the bottom of the Sunset League standings, Coach Gutierrez's rebuilding effort at Fountain Valley. They finished 1-9 on the season. Our first nominee from the Barons is junior linebacker Caine Elroy. He finished with 70 tackles on the season and 1 sack.
Caine, he's a big-time linebacker, always made offenses know that he's there. Even though Fountain Valley, they gave up a lot of yards, gave up a lot of points, he's a guy that stands out because if there's a run through and a tackle for loss in the backfield, it's usually Caine Elroy, bringing down running backs behind the line of scrimmage, chasing guys down from the back, sacking quarterbacks. He's that kind of guy, only a junior, has good size, still getting better. So I can't wait to see Caine Elroy next year, but I know he had a game this year with 17 tackles. You have 17 tackles, you're making the offense feel you. They're in the huddle saying, we got to get 2 guys on Elroy. So excellent football player, and I know Coach Gutierrez is happy to have him back next year.
And I mentioned Coach Gutierrez's rebuilding effort because to do that at a program that's down, you got to have buy-in from players across the board, and you got to have leaders that buy in. And Caine is one of those players on Fountain Valley that's bought in. Coach Gutierrez talks about faith and blue pride and believing in yourself. Caine Elroy represents that, and that's why he's one of our nominees for People's Choice MVP. Our other from Fountain Valley is Ben Pham, junior running back / middle linebacker. Finished with 300 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, 60 tackles. Numbers that don't necessarily jump off the page, but he's a guy who's playing both ways every game, all game, working hard.
Absolutely. He's at the center of most of what Fountain Valley does, whether they're handing him the ball, whether it's him being the defensive quarterback. And every week when we talk to Coach Gutierrez, he loved talking about Ben Pham. He would always say, angles, leverage, and spacing. This is a guy that understands angles, leverage, and spacing. Basically just a football coach's way of saying this guy's a heck of a football player, has great instincts, great intuition, plays hard, works hard, he's a leader. And these 2 juniors are guys that Coach Gutierrez is going to lean on next year to say, we're rebuilding together. You guys are the class that is going to set the example for Fountain Valley going in the right way. So these are 2 key players, both excellent. But Ben Pham, he's been doing it for a long time, was on varsity as a sophomore as a big contributor. Another guy that's very deserving.
Well, that does it for our nominees. 2 from each team, 12 total for the Sunset Rewind People's Choice MVP. Go to sunsetrewind.com, cast your vote. We've got things in place to make sure you can only vote once, so don't try to stuff the ballot box for your guys. I know you're going to try that, Howard, but only vote once, and we'll let you know soon who the People's Choice MVP is from Sunset Rewind. For my co-host Howard Kroom, for all the players, parents, and coaches in the Sunset League, this is Alex Crawford saying from the 405 to PCH, from Saddleback to the Pacific Ocean, you've been watching Sunset Rewind. Thanks for tuning in.